He's Molly's getting the link to work, but we can take a call and kind of get started while we wait for that to happen. Well, actually, we have to first open it up for public comment. Is there anyone in the room or online, the public, that would have any statements or comments?
Chair Ryan, I didn't see any online.
All right. So now we go on to roll call. So Bruce Dickinson here. Chris Aosa.
Here.
Dave Bachman.
Here.
Debbie Walton.
Here.
Dina Castro. Haley, I was just calling your name.
He's here. Thank you.
John Epstein. Rochelle Lucas. And Kimberly Cruy. Present. Linda Bell.
Here.
Morning.
Morning.
Nathan Teskey. Nina Stafford. Paul Cummings. Here. And myself. I am present. Moving forward, is there any members that would like to share anything before we get started? Anyone online have any comments, anything they want to share? Chris, I saw you at the housing conference. How'd that go for you?
Yeah, it was great. I really enjoy attending that. How about yourself?
It was fantastic as always. It was a new
Absolutely.
venue, shorter time frame, 2 days instead of 3. It was a nice change.
Better dare we present it.
Yeah, so we presented with the housing authority on lessons learned on permanent supportive housing. We're about 5 years into that being a thing, and we're really starting to get a lot of data back on what works and what doesn't work. And it's programs are shifting and still adapting. No one has it down to a science yet, but it's time to start sharing what works and what doesn't work. So kind of take that scary stigma off of permanent supportive housing, because it really works. It's just expensive and hard work. Any other updates? Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, she's on the phone and working on unmuting. So Molly, did the *6 work? Oh, shoot.
Can you guys?
Yes.
Yay.
Can hear you.
Old-fashioned phone version today.
Well, just in time, Molly. It's time for your executive report.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm joining virtually today as I have to leave a bit to join a panel discussion this afternoon on with a bunch of attorneys on why they should care about affordable housing. So that'll be fun. But I'm really pleased to start off the meeting with you all with a very momentous milestone that we achieved yesterday, and that is the financial close of our Woodspring Apartments preservation resyndication. Woohoo! So we, as you all know, this board, our board, and those residents at Woodspring have really came together with Oregon Housing and Community Services to assemble the financing for us to acquire the property 2 years ago. And I'm actually quite very impressed with the team, and of course our Bronner and company consultants that helped us package up all the various resources and additional funding to be able to resyndicate and bring in new tax credits to that, so we can renovate those all the 172 units for long-term longevity and protect the residents who continue to be low income there, to have a home where they know that their rents won't be hiked up. So anyway, big news across the board on that front. Also wanted to share with you, you probably have already seen, my next update being that I'm getting to introduce Nadia Mohammed. She's going to be our HAC support advisory body coordinator. Thank you, Nadia. You've been, as you know, you've been supporting our other housing advisory committee, the homeless services one, as we all like to call the Solutions Council. So it's been great seeing what you've done there. And don't worry, these guys, this group is really nice and really, really great folks. BNS, this is a transition for BNS is staying at the department, of course, but she's moving on to other community engagement projects. And it's just, these shifts are just sort of us helping better consolidate and support our public relations team in the department. We didn't have an August meeting, but I was able to share with our board and in my newsletter around a really exciting opportunity that we participate in over the summer called Camp Rosenbaum. And I just encourage you all to learn a little bit more about camp, maybe even become a supporter. They are a 501c3. They do bring together lots of partners from the housing authorities in Southwest Washington, as well as Oregon. And it allows kids who live in housing authority housing or a participant of our programs to go to camp for free, overnight camp for a week at the coast. And this is often the first time these kids have been to camp, and sometimes it's the first time they've been away from their homes. And it really allows them to just really be a kid and have a lot of fun. And generally it's tied to them getting to know other adults. They have literally hundreds of adults cheering for them over the course of that week. And sometimes they're frankly just kind of excited to have 3 meals a day of really good, healthy food. You just don't know what these kids are coming from. So BNS and Kath and I went to go spend half a day there and really cheer on our staff volunteers who got to go. And because we have staff volunteers, we were able to send 27 kids from Washington County to be at camp, and they got to just come home and talk about all their new friends that they had. So that was really exciting. And if anyone is interested, I'm sure there's lots of fundraising opportunities too for Camp Rosenbaum. On another note, I wanted to just also share another update on our Section 18 disposition initiative. And I may steal a little bit of thunder from later on and share one quick story about Barbara. And Barbara and her husband were longtime public housing residents, and they raised their 4 kids in a single family home. And they started working with Bienestar. Bienestar, is Nathan there?
Yeah.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey.
Thank you, Nathan, and your team. You guys helped Barbara get to the finish line and her family, and now they get to own their homes that they've been living in for a long time.
Very cool.
Sorry. So anyway, yay. It's great to have those kind of partnerships. You know, we have some tools. Bienestar has way other tools, and we bring everything together to help people become first-time homeowners. I just wanted to share a couple logistical flags for you all. One sort of exciting innovation that we're going through as a housing authority on our second floor, as you go through in our reception, we are moving to a mostly appointment only in October. And really that's to address workflow needs of our rental assistance division. And we shared that with our participants weeks ago, gave them plenty of notice for the shift, but we wanted to make you aware in case you hear about that shift as well. Frankly, that's appointment only it's a lot of housing authorities have gone in that direction, you know, a long time ago. So we're kind of moving in that direction as well. It creates a little bit more predictability for, frankly, everyone, participants and us alike. And over the next year, we're going to be undergoing some office planning. As you also probably saw as you walked in, that first floor has been closed to the DA's office. That those folks moved out, and we're going to actually take over all 3 floors of Adams Crossing. So that's really a great amenity for really great. It sort of speaks to our growth. We're kind of cramped in those 2 floors, and it really offers us an opportunity to have a public-facing first floor. We don't have to deal with elevators breaking down for folks who have mobility issues, and so it's just a much better customer or experience overall. Sort of my last update to share with you, we've gone through a updated work plan for fiscal year 25-26, and we are establishing some new SMART goals for ourselves, so some stretch, some aspirational goals, and we've put them into 4 main objectives. One is our community impact. Second is what we call people and culture. Third is under the rubric of process and technology. And 4th is fiscal stewardship. So just a couple highlights for you all. We're going to endeavor to house or prevent homelessness for 725 households at the end of this fiscal year. We're going to sustain stable housing for 5,200 households with ongoing rental assistance. Our goal last year was close to 5,000, so we're trying to push. We're hoping to sell 30 of the single-family homes as part of our Section 18 DISPO work and dedicate those resources for future affordable housing developments. And we would like to begin construction on 100 or renovation on 120 units of transitional housing for people with behavioral health and substance use needs. And we want to deepen our understanding of the people who are residing or participating in our programs, people who we serve, to ensure that we are providing access and opportunity for all. So we're eager to work with you and our Solutions Council to keep us on those goals. And as we make progress, we will make periodic updates for you all. And we want to create a community where each of us has an affordable home and the supports each of us need to thrive. So with that, I will turn things over to Nadia and Binette for their staff liaison report. But also, actually, before I do that, I'm happy to take any questions for you all.
Just to clarify, Molly, real quick, is finance presenting right after you?
I'm sorry, I can't hear that.
We have finance presenting after you.
Oh,
Is it-
that's right. That's right. We did
We just wanted
decide.
to confirm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is-
I did have one
Sorry,
question
can't
on the appointment only switch. A question on that, like, I moved up from, don't tell anyone, California about 12 years ago.
We forgive you.
Yeah, but the DMV down there was appointment only. It was great. You only had to wait 5 minutes. It worked well from a user experience, but at the same time, are you tracking how sort of the wait time to get an appointment to make sure people aren't waiting too long? Like, if you have to wait a month or 2, obviously in this environment, that's a really long time without being able to speak to somebody.
I can speak up, Molly, to this, if that's okay.
Sure.
Liz, sorry, hi, Molly. So that is definitely something that we're gonna be tracking and seeing, is right now, people will be able to still walk in, potentially make an appointment that day. But we're trying to really soften the culture of being able to, the team members have to just drop everything, so we're not providing customer service like around for the people that they're file that they're working, right? And so we want to be able to kind of more predict that and support that. So that is part of our goals of tracking to see what does it look like. We're even exploring additional opportunities to see what can happen for online appointment scheduling versus having to manually do it, which is what we'll have first phase. So our front desk team, who you see out there right now, will be kind of coordinating that and putting it on the calendars. And it is, as we should shift over, we're gonna continue to reevaluate and try to improve that process along the way. And if we do find that it is taking too long for people to get appointments, we wanna keep like looking at solutions for that. So one of those, that and a few other things are kind of key items that we're gonna keep taking away and reevaluating.
I will mention, Ryan, also that one of the things we are looking at also is folks who come in an emergency, they're not going to be appointment only, right? Appointments are for things that are much more predictable and much more processed. So if you're coming in because you have a change in your family size, because you had a child or adopted a child, you can come in. It's a little easier then because you know what paperwork you need to bring. Your essentially occupancy specialist come work with you going through that instead of coming in. They have to pull up your file, figure out where you are, all that. You know who's coming in. It makes it a much more streamlined process for the rental assistance team.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Question. Hey, Molly, it's Paul. A question on the sale of homes on the Section 8 disposition. Is there a target for like what percent of the net proceeds are going to go for future affordable housing? Is 100%, or is it you're going to take out something at 75%? Just it probably was somewhere else and I might have missed it, but is it just a target in terms of how much of the net proceeds you will put into a fund or whatever so that it will be for future development versus current needs?
Maybe I should answer
Yeah,
that.
that's a great question.
Jill's offered to take it.
Do you want me to take that,
Oh, okay.
Molly?
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. Paul, the Section 18 proceeds coming from the sale are very specific.
Okay.
Because they're regulated by HUD. Shortcut is that they have to be used for the housing authority, and housing authority, you can call it targeted population. So we can only use it for things that are related to vouchers and or other affordable housing. So we can't just use it to cover general, stuff. Say, transitional housing, for example, there's a lot of work. The services are, we can't necessarily use it for that. So it's very restricted. We are using some of that for the sale proceeds for our Wood Spring project.
Okay.
Because that had a number of vouchers in the project. We are also looking at redevelopment of some of our existing public housing sites. Because we're looking at, after the 60 gets sold, what other things can we or should we be doing with those sites, the remaining sites, because they should be redeveloped.
Okay, thank you.
Two things I would add to that question, Paul, and some of it is supporting the staff working on the dispo work. So it's not 100% of all the sales proceeds. We do have to cover our staff costs to do that. And our goal when we established the program was to try to create 100 new affordable housing units while we're dispoing 60. So we would have a net overall increase of housing in our community.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Any other questions or comments?
Good question.
So moving on.
I did want to use this opportunity to give our deputy CFO a chance to do a quick financial update, just so we can get you guys all informed on that side too. Ryan, are you there?
Yep. Good morning, Molly. Do we have slides? So just skip ahead straight to the org chart one when you get a chance, and while you do that, so we're gonna be doing a quick closeout of the 23-24 fiscal year, so headed back to June 30th, just to close it out. It is a different structure from how I think you all have been seeing quarterly reports in the past. It's gonna mirror the way that you saw the budget presented for the 25-26 fiscal year, so trying to get everything in alignment with how you saw the budget presented for the this current fiscal year that we're operating in. When a few months ago, we presented some audit findings that we had from the 23-24 fiscal year. And the root cause issue, at least on the finance side, was really around vacancies and turnover. So I wanted to show the org chart, and that the last time I talked to you all those green boxes were gray, showing that they were vacant. They are now all filled. Which also wanted to introduce some folks here. So this is Sue Rojas. She's the new Housing Services Controller.
Hey, Sue.
She started with us a month ago officially, after being with us through Robert Half as a consultant. She's a CPA. She has a background in multinational corporations, auditing, and public accounting. So really excited to bring her on board. And then this is Dana King. She started with us on Monday as the accounting operations supervisor. And previously worked in construction accounting with David Evans and Associates in Hoffman. Currently getting a master's in professional accounting and plans to sit for the CPA. So we're really excited about the new talent that we've been able to bring in. Looking at people who have different experiences outside of traditional government accounting, based on the work that we're doing here in the Housing Authority. And then that last green box that says accounting assistant, have a new hire starting next Monday. He's coming to us from a nonprofit where he manages Continuum of Care federal awards, and then previously worked as an accountant for a property management company. So bringing in skill sets that are highly relevant to the work that we're doing in the Housing Authority. Excited to be fully staffed and address that kind of primary root cause issue that we saw in our audits. All right, let's keep going. So let's go to this year-end financial update. I'm going to go through quickly since I know we do have a full agenda today. If you can see on the screen fairly easily, compared to what our budget was, we estimated our expenses pretty accurately, but we underestimated what our revenues were going to be. These were primarily non-cash transactions, so interest on notes receivable and unrealized lease revenues. So do just want to show that we are cash positive, and we are going to continue to take steps to make sure that we are accounting for those non-cash revenues that are going to be looked at by our auditors. And we're going to continue to be transparent with this group about what kind of our cash transaction versus non-cash, just so you can kind of fully provide that oversight through different lenses. Let's go to the next slide and do some program breakouts. So the rental assistance program, our estimates were not that far off. I'm so sorry, Justin, Jill, that you're struggling to see that it is in your packets.
Yeah, yes.
So one of the common themes that we have seen, looking across the different program areas that we're going to be paying attention to as we're budgeting for the upcoming 26-27 fiscal year, is that we did consistently overestimate salary needs. So one of the things that we'll be doing is checking the assumptions behind that, and making sure that we're tracking that throughout the year if we need to adjust our budgets. We don't want to overspend. We also don't want to leave money on the table. So just a cost center that we're going to be really paying attention to as we're entering into the next fiscal year. Let's go to the next. Yep.
Just, is there a quick response on the difference on the other line? Like what's which is like $1 million different? Was there something, if I'm seeing that right, right, the other, the 47 to the $1.1 million budget to actual?
47,000.
Yeah, the
You can see other versus
actual.
Other.
revenue.
line.
Yeah, is it, was there like one or two unexpected sources that showed up there or something else that?
So this is money that comes in from other counties. So I think when we get participants who are transferring into Washington County from another one, and Liz might be able to explain this better, but my understanding is that there's some revenues that come in with them from the other county during a transition period.
So we get to, they pay us an admin fee because we're administrating that voucher on their behalf. And because of our shortfall status over the last couple of years, we've transitioned to that we're not absorbing, we're only billing. So that we're gonna just kind of keep seeing that number rise. Just as other households going poured out to housing authorities, they're doing the same thing, so sometimes it is this in and out that goes with it, but that's the quick summary.
And I'd like to point out that even though you see that pour in revenue, there's also an equivalent expense usually of it going out. So it's gonna gross it up, but net, it doesn't make a huge impact to the bottom line.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, cause. I was gonna say, cause a few years ago, I think it was reported that you were losing money, there was more admin fees on people that have left than came in, right, so. That's kind of a tricky thing to keep track of.
Yes.
Hey, Ryan, just top line, am I reading it right? So 68 million's top line revenue, and of that 68 million, that 51 million is a piece of the 68, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, within the portfolio, obviously the biggest program within the housing authority.
Which was
is
kind of my
vouchers.
question.
Yeah,
Of the 68 million, 51 million is flowing through here.
through the to the rental assistance division. Okay. So on the public housing front, we do see again that we underspent on the payroll. We did have higher expenses for that administrative and overhead line. And let's see what else. The one other thing that I wanted to call out here is we drew down more of our reserves through HUD, and it as we come into this year, we're watching closely kind of the direction that we're seeing from HUD around reserves. I think there's chatter that those funds could be potentially at risk, and so we're developing ways to think about using those reserve funds first. We don't have full clarity yet, but we did make that draw just to move them out of the HUD line of credit and into our own system. So really thinking about both the ones that we're holding and the ones that are still with HUD, but kind of tracking what we're hearing from other housing authorities and what notices we're getting from HUD to make sure that if we need to, that we'll be able to spend those funds first to make sure they're not at risk.
And holding means actual cash in our piggy bank.
In our piggy bank,
Yeah.
not in the HUD line of credit system. So on the next slide, in the 24-25 fiscal year, we talked about those section 18 dispos. This was the single home that we sold in the 24-25 fiscal year, right towards the end of the year. And that was the actual gain from the sale of that house after the different kind of reductions in fees that go into that sale. Let's go to the next slide for affordable housing. So here you'll see there's a pretty big jump from budget to actual for that other revenue. That's one of those non-cash transactions that we talked about. So that's lease revenue from the AHP 1 and then the AHP phase 2 projects. So it's not an actual cash transaction, but something that is one of those non-cash transfers. And then there's a big jump on the administrative and overhead expense that you'll see of a few million, and that's related to the acquisition of the Cornell Road Hotel for permanent supportive housing.
That's categorized as admin?
Well, all the fees that are kind of related to that acquisition. And then if we go to affordable housing development, so we see again a really big jump on that investment income that we show, and that's the investment on the notes payable. So that's another one of those non-cash transactions. And then there is another increase in other revenue, and that's related to, it's the Katama project, and it's just a change in the valuation of the partnership. So all good inputs for us as we move into budgeting for the 26-27 fiscal year, that we are kind of tracking these different revenues and expenses that we think are going to come in. And similarly, that we're looking at payroll to make sure that we are accurately adjusting our assumptions around how much will land and that we're tracking that cost center. And then if you go to the last slide, This year, for the first time, we presented this to you all during budgeting. We talked to our board of directors about it. We're gonna be budgeting the housing authority and the housing services side simultaneously. We all share kind of a general cost allocation overhead plan, and budgeting them separately has created challenges because you're making changes on one part of the organization that's having a change that you're not immediately seeing. So we're gonna be budgeting those together for better integration across the programs, thinking how we work together. So a lot of upside here. The one drawback that I just wanted to be transparent about is we are in the middle of an ERP implementation for a new financial system and others, but it's gonna change our chart of accounts. So there's a number of impacts that we're gonna see through this process, and so changing the way that we budget while this is going on creates an added layer of complexity. It still is, I think, the most effective thing that we can do, so just something to manage. Another change that we have been able to get through, the housing authority is not subject to Oregon local budget law. So the budget was not kind of hardwired in the rest of the county's budget system. So we actually didn't have budget to actuals in our financial system that we could pull because the budget wasn't loaded. As we are moving into this new system, our partners in the county central finance group are going to be loading that budget in so that we can track our housing authority budget the same way that we do anything else. So continuing to look for all the ways that we can tighten those controls a bit and have better visibility to our spending.
Just, you mentioned it on the difference on payroll budget actuals, but the last slide, 2 slides back, where it looks like a pretty significant drop right on your payroll. So when you're going forward, are you using some modified, when you talk about just this forecasting, but are you taking some modification on the budget to be the new budget, or are you taking it off the actual?
So I think for affordable housing development, I think this was related to the transfer of properties that we were using for staff time and then transferring them to a partnership. So this one is a little bit more dramatic than what we see in some of the other program areas. The way that the county budgets, we have to be responsible and kind of budget for our full approved workforce. And I think what we probably need after that is some modifier that we know that positions are vacant and that people leave and that it takes time to refill positions. And I think that the county practice of budgeting for the full cost is just something that we need to modify a bit, knowing that you don't have 100% still work chart all year. And so that's the modifier that I think we really need to look at is what assumptions we're making after we've done the work to budget for our full approved workforce.
Thank you.
So that decrease in payroll was essentially outsourcing to a partner?
Yeah, so this was when the
equity
transition,
in
yeah, when the properties moved to the transition, we're no longer gonna be billing our employees for the work to maintain those properties, because those properties have moved off to a partnership fund. So we saw this in a few areas, and so our payroll budget to actuals here is a lot more dramatic than what we saw. This wasn't just, we didn't spend as much, this was just, we changed ownership structures. The rest of what you're seeing, typically more like a 20% underspend, I think is just the difference of budgeting for the full cost of an approved workforce versus what we actually see throughout the year, which is some level of vacancy.
Can we ask 25, 26 questions, or you prefer we don't do that right now?
We will be going through the Q1 actuals of the 25-26 year at the next meeting, and I
Okay.
do want to be mindful of the rest of the agenda, so.
That's why I was trying
yeah.
not to take you offline. Okay.
Great update, thank you. Any other questions? Hey Molly, we can see you now. Okay, so we'll move on to the staff liaison update.
Yep, that's me. Okay, some logistical updates. I know we've been kind of going back and forth with some of our meetings. Our October meeting is not canceled. It's the 4th Thursday of the month, so we're not canceling that. But we do have our housing forum, so we still encourage you to do that. That's October 30th. We're excited about that. We're gonna be sending RSVP information about the forum at the end of this month, which is literally like couple days from now. We're also hosting our November meeting, but it's gonna be the week before Thanksgiving, so just noting that. Our December meeting will be canceled, and we'll start luncheon, which we do every year. And if you're a new member, we usually have an annual luncheon in December to celebrate all of you, and you get to meet some of the other advisory bodies that the department supports, so it's a great time, so we don't need to have a meeting during that month, so, but we're excited about hosting the luncheon. And then more housing forum stuff, our Community Cares Award nomination process is really pretty much coming to a close. We had 9 nominations submitted, which is amazing for a first time. Our advisory bodies did put in nominations, so hopefully next year we'll be able to open it up to the public. Learning a lot, you know, it's the first time, so we're, you know, taking some of the learnings and hopefully continuously improving it every year. So just want to thank the chairs, HAC and also Solutions Council and Molly for all of their work on that. But we're gonna announce the winner at the forum, so that's another reason that you should, so you'll know the winner. So excited about that. And more events, tomorrow, we're having our Affordable Housing Preservation Project celebration. We're really excited to get to celebrate all of the HP4 portfolio work and just excited to kind of celebrate all of this renovation. It's happening tomorrow at Holly Tree, so I think y'all all should have gotten an invite to that. I already see people. Be nice on you. So excited to have y'all represent obviously HAC, but also a community member. And then we also have an October 16th event, which is the Woodspring Contributing Off event, which we're also really excited about. You should have received that RSVP, but just let me know if you didn't. But yeah, we're excited. There's so much stuff that real estate is doing. And I know Leslie and her team are working really hard. And we get to party now. So that's exciting. I did want to mention real quick that Dina, who's our HAC member, she wasn't able to make it today, but she has a personal thing, but she wanted to extend her gratitude to Washington County for their participation and sponsorship at the Transcending Hope Second Annual Gala, which was themed in this together. They successfully raised over 80,000 to support their expansion efforts, which is really exciting. So she just wanted to share her gratitude on that, but she couldn't be here today. And then just transition stuff, like Molly mentioned, I'm transitioning out of my role with being the liaison and also for the Resident Advisory Board that I also liaison. Nadia stepping in and y'all are in good hands. We just feel like this is a natural transition because she's already supporting advisory bodies. So she shouted me today, but hopefully October she'll take this seat. And then we'll continuously kind of be in that transition. Hopefully transitioning out fully November, December, I don't know, depending on how things go. But I just want to say thanks for all of y'all's work, and just like I feel like in such intense times, I feel like seeing volunteers and people in the community who care about their community show up to spaces like this and also in other spaces. I think it's just so, it just gives me hope, and like it just shows that there are people that care about their community and want to show up and do like good things for their community. So I just want to show my appreciation for y'all, and it really makes this work feel a little bit, you know, just coming into work every day, and I just feel a bit more motivated. So I just want to say thanks. Y'all are doing such great work. And
What are you gonna do, BNF? Can you tell us?
Engagement work still, so stuff like the housing forum and homeless services work, some shelter engagement work, so just still engagement work, but not advisory body work. So I'll be around. It's just, you might see me in a different capacity, but just want to show my appreciation, y'all.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're gonna be missed.
Oh.
And a personal thank you from both Melinda and I to you help us look good.
No.
Yes, thank you, Bennett, for all your hard work. From the bottom of my heart, you've been very helpful throughout these years for me. I appreciate you.
Melinda, y'all are great. Rushing stuff over.
One logistics thing we didn't talk about yesterday, are the nominees all coming to the housing forum? And then.
Thematic.
Okay.
Like the Oscars kind of.
Sure.
Let's upgrade our camera team.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? The staff liaison update?
Yep.
All right. So next it's the chair report, which is me, and today at least, and giving an update on what we've been doing in the last couple of months, because we didn't meet last month. Everyone's favorite topic, our bylaws. We're almost there. Again, a lot of hard work by BNF, and really the focus is taking some of we've been talking about the Solutions Council a lot, taking some of the lessons learned from their bylaws, because those have been updated more recently, updating ours, but that plus matching some of our goals moving forward as well. And it included some temporary work groups, which allows us to call a meeting outside of these meetings in case we need to figure out a solution, because we weren't able to do that before. Some codes of conduct and our annual work plan. And making sure that we review our bylaws every 2 years instead of waiting 10 or whatever it was. And just pick up this. So we're hoping to bring all of those changes to the October meeting. That might get pushed to the November meeting, but then the committee will have a chance to review and discuss that.
It's a big project.
Many months. We're almost there.
And personally, I wanted to bring up we've talked about the luncheon that's coming up, and Solutions Council, and our committee working with Solutions Council a little bit more closely, because we're kind of two separate entities, and it'd be nice for us to be able to work together and understand what we can provide and value for each other. And just like Lisa and I presenting on lessons learned, permanent supportive housing, sharing our lessons learned between the two advisory committees, and being able to help the county. So if the members can think about ways that maybe we can improve how we help them, we can have an open conversation with the Solutions Council as well.
Well, now you have one person who's supporting both,
Yeah.
so that's great.
Yes. Look forward to that. Okay, any other questions?
Just real quick, the Solutions Council, how long has it been around? It's relatively newly formed, right?
Well, in its current formation, that's correct.
Okay.
It's sort of restructured, new bylaws, reestablished and focused on the entire homeless services system about 2 years ago. Nicole, does that sound right?
January of 24, so just about 2 years ago.
Okay, that's what I thought.
But it as our Continuum of Care Board, which is one of its roles now, which is overseeing our investments that are federally funded.
Got it.
COC funds for homeless services. It's been in existence since we've had COC funds, so it's very old in that way. It's just sort of been revitalized and reshaped to also inform oversight of our regional funds and our state funds.
Got it. Okay.
Sorry, was that too complicated?
No,
Sorry.
no.
It's old and new.
No, that blank look I always have, so. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so moving on to ongoing business. And Jill will be presenting some project updates.
Thank you, Ryan. And with me is Lisa Barron, our real estate division manager. I'm actually gonna let her present. The reason we wanted to bring these projects to you is normally in our process. Before we go to our board, we present to HAC our activities so that you get sort of a preview of what we do before we go to the board. But given our missed meeting and some of the fast pace that we needed to move, especially from construction and we didn't have the opportunity to present a full presentation to you about our 3 projects that are currently in construction and development. These were the 3 projects, Wood Spring, Heartwood, and Cornell Road. And you see on here, they're all rehab of different kinds. You've heard Molly talk about Wood Spring, 172 units. We purchased the building back in 2023. It's completely rehab, where we just got the sort of request to start construction today, and I was like, oh, we gotta sign it. So they can start construction. And then Heartwood and Cornell Road, we both had design build sort of RFPs that went out, and wanted to sort of move quickly on those because we have also deadlines. And there are sort of, one is Heartwood is permanent supportive housing, Cornell Road is a transitional housing that we purchased. And those are also under tight timelines in order to make sure that we could meet out and sheltered folks, especially mainly for Cornell Road. So without further ado, I'm going to transfer the presentation to Lisa Barron.
Good morning. So I'm going to just go through each project one by one and just give you a quick overview. You'll have this presentation available to get into the details. So yesterday was a great milestone. We closed the construction financing on Wood Spring Apartments. This is a 172 unit property, all with 2 bedrooms, and we purchased the property about 2 years ago, and it primarily seniors live there, but we think over time families will start to populate the property given the size of the units. We're doing a substantial rehab to the property. Our partners for design build are Walsh Construction and MWA. They've been fantastic to work with so far in the pre-development period, really helping us hone in on our scope of work and what we want to be doing there. One feature I think that's nice to talk about is that we will be adding air conditioning to these units, which in this day and age is definitely needed. We are looking to start construction in the next day or 2, and it's about an 18-month construction schedule. So it is occupied rehab. What we have done is try to minimize the amount of relocation so that we're going to be working in units on a day-to-day basis with the scope, because it is a senior population and they didn't really want, we asked them, and relocating was not something many of them wanted to do. So we're going to be offering up the community room during the day. We'll have some host units that they can go hang out in, but we may be going in and out on a day-to-day basis, and we minimize the actual longer term relocation to households that really their units need a lot of work. We are also having a celebration in October, so we hope we'll see you there. To kick this off, it was a preservation project that the residents of this property came to their electeds and said, hey, our property is expiring in terms of its affordability covenants, and the county and the state jumped in and saved the property. So it is an expensive project, but a meaningful project, and we look forward to updating you. Next slide. Yes.
Just a quick question. So how is it fully occupied? Are there any vacant units? How occupied is it right now?
It's fully occupied, but I think upon vacancies, we're leaving a few units vacant for on-site relocation. We do have households that are over income who live here. And so part of the relocation is that they will be receiving a payout, and they will be relocating to market rate. We already have some families that are buying homes with those funds. So we'll have more information. We're still getting everybody's income certifications done, but there are over income households here that won't be able to stay given the tax credit structure.
Okay, thank you. Question, Brian will be concerned about this one. The P-tax, or is it mini splits for the ACs?
We
Balancing out
are
long-term.
looking at mini splits. So the initial plan was actually just a portable unit. But Welsh has done such a good job of scoping this that we potentially have some funds to do a mini split, and so it's a huge leap. I think it's about $1.3 million for the whole property, but we feel like it's important, and so we're gonna be talking. We've already started conversations with the investor and lender about utilizing our contingency to do that, and given how well the due diligence, how deep the due diligence went, we feel pretty confident that we could spend those funds.
Yeah, that's great. And long-term maintenance, it's so much cheaper to maintain, isn't it?
Yeah, and also the other ones don't last that long
Yeah.
too, so,
Yeah.
yeah, so we're excited about that element. Next slide. Cornell Road Transitional Housing. This is really our joint work with the SHS and homeless services teams to create more transitional housing in the overall continuum of housing in the county. This is a former hotel that currently has 99 units, but after rehab, it'll be somewhere from 75 to 85. We would call them beds, but they're actual rooms, and 3 different types of care in the building. Walsh and MWA were also selected for this project through a competitive design build RFP. And the construction budget will be between 4 and 6 million. We're currently in pre-development. There's an operator RFP in progress, and there's some site investigation. Of course, as you know, everything you thought you knew going into buying a building isn't what you really know until you're in the building and you can open up walls and things like that. So we're looking at starting construction in November and concluding construction completion next October.
I had a question, Lisa. I see that you say operator, RFP in progress for the operator. I was talking to an operator recently and who's in a similar spot on a different project. They experienced a little bit of like coming into the process late and having opinions about some of the design elements and stuff. And it was too late for some of those. Have you thought about that in this case at all?
Oh, yeah. That's exactly.
Okay.
So we've been having this conversation,
Yeah.
and as a result, just like very recently, we pushed out the completion date so that there would be an extra 2-ish months to work with the operator.
Gotcha.
So we, our homeless services team had been sort of the operator proxy, but that really, we knew ultimately that might not be an ideal situation. So that is exactly the conclusion we've come to, is that we need more time with the actual operator. Our developer is CCC, Center of Study Concern. Sorry, my morning brain today. And they have a lot of experience doing this work, so we're very lucky to have their kind of consultation side by side because they run a lot of these. So I think we'll be ahead of the game coming into this because they've already, they've experienced some of the issues in building. And so, and then we've also toured several other similar facilities and tried to glean lessons learned from those as well. So we're hoping that we'll have preliminarily selected an operator in the next month or so. Is that right? Yeah,
I think that's right.
yeah. And we'll be able to work with them for 6 to 8 weeks.
That's great, good answer, thank you for that. But I didn't know that about Central City Concern, so that prompts the question. They're like development consulting, you said they're the developer, but they're not gonna be a long-term owner or anything,
Nope.
right? Yeah,
They're just consultants.
yes.
Yeah, they're a development consultant on this
Okay.
project, yeah.
Follow up then, so are they gonna potentially respond to the operator RFP or no? Are they?
Good question, absolutely.
No.
I think we can
They
say
can't,
we
right, it's conflict.
know that they did not because we received 5 applications, and those applications, I believe, are public and in
Okay,
process.
okay.
So we can't say any more, but we can say that we can confirm that they did not apply.
Okay, well, I understood their role kind of evolved right throughout this process, but didn't know if that was even a possibility, so thank you.
Yeah, I
I just need to do a time check. If we can wrap up in the next 5-ish.
I have a question.
Less than, I know.
This is a question,
Um,
Alexa?
Linda,
Hi, guys. How many of these between 75 to 85 beds are ADA accessible?
we are going to meet the minimum standards, which I think is either 5 to 10%. I want to say there's 4 ADA units per floor. But we're still figuring that out right now. But we're retaining all the existing ADA units. And we're working on ADA accessibility on the exterior, which isn't great because of the slope, as well as to all the common spaces throughout the building.
Thank you.
Next slide. Heartwood Commons. So all of you are familiar with Heartwood Commons, 54 studio units in Aloha. We're doing a phase 2 construction renovation. So for the first phase, we were unable to do all the things that a 1980-ish building needs. For those of you in the architecture world, the 1980s were kind of known as not the best of architecture eras.
The fact that many of us are products of the 80s. So
That was successful.
that was a success. But please go on.
So this next phase is really about building systems and about safety and about usage, like services and usage for how we serve our residents. So those are our priorities right now. We're going to rewrap the building. The roof is not great. And so we'll be replacing the roof, rewrapping the building, redoing the office spaces, sort of pulling them out a little bit into the lobby, securitizing that's even a word, the entryway and creating a little security booth and some extra offices and really just making sure that the building systems are working. So those are kind of and redoing the entire office space area. So those are kind of the big ticket items that we're looking at. We're bringing on Bremick and CETA as our design build team, and they're already getting going on thinking about the project, and we're in our pre-development phase. We're looking to start in January and end in December at the latest. We will be keeping about 5 to 6 units vacant on site also, just in consideration of the population and helping them relocate when absolutely necessary. And we're working on a communications plan because of this population has really special needs and really making sure that the population, their case managers, their resident services providers are really well aware of each phase of our work. That's the end of my presentation.
I have one question about the funding sources for those. I think you presented in a few meetings ago, so apologies, but is there a reason why the funding sources for Heartwood is not SHS funding since it's a PSH person?
Yeah, so the capital is funded by Metro Affordable Housing Bond.
Okay.
But SHS is the funder of the ARLA vouchers and all of the services on site.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a very good question.
Okay. There's a lot of nuance to the question I didn't go into.
And I'm taking the
Thank you.
opportunity to step in.
Appreciate it.
Really to say that Metro's legal team has advised that the SHS funds can be used for capital investments, just not for permanent housing capital investments. So we are strategic about how to make sure we're maximizing the use of all the funds. So for this project, because it is permanent housing, the capital investments come from Affordable Housing Bond, and that's it. I'm sorry. Yes. And then SHS is funding the operations, but in Cornell Road, we are using SHS.
Understood. Thank you. That's very helpful to
Is
understand.
that, Jess, is that a relatively recent legal opinion or is that, because I know a couple of years ago there was conversation about this and I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, it was shared with the counties, I believe, like 18 months ago or so. So not so recent. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we're gonna move on to new business and department updates. And Liz, the rental assistant division manager, and M is the housing program coordinator. Will be providing kind of back-to-back presentations on the emergency housing vouchers and the wait list management program. And there were a few questions at the end that I just wanted to mention now while they're presenting. Think about potential partnership ideas that the housing authority can collaboration ideas between the housing authority and nonprofits or other organizations that are out there that can help support this. And then think about how they can address the participant concerns with the shifts in these programs.
That's right. Hi, everyone. Liz Morris, your pronouns. I'm the rental assistance division manager. Most of you know me. This is probably not the first time you've heard about the emergency housing vouchers, as Molly's been sharing updates through director's reports over the last several months when HUD announced the change in this program. I'm, as Ryan mentioned, Em is going to be presenting with me as well on this topic. What we're going to be doing is giving that update about the sunset, going into a little bit more detail from what we've already discussed, as well as some of our ongoing work. And again, is next slide. The agenda is getting that impact, understanding that discussion point that we want to bring to the table with all of you, and how we're able to figure out some of our continued assistance planning. We have lots of thoughts and ideas, but we definitely are open and we want to see what magical items that we're not thinking of and your expertise to bring to the table. Next slide. And as Ryan had mentioned, these are the questions that we're going to be posing kind of at the end for you to think about throughout this presentation. And obviously, if there's anything else, any questions that you have for us, but these are some of the things that we'd just like to make sure that we have that opportunity about other partners that we should be collaborating with, addressing participant concerns, and then what other actions that might be able to be taken that we're not able to consider or have not considered at this point. All right, and then I'm going to pass it over to Em, who's going to give a deeper dive about what emergency housing vouchers are and what our next steps are going to be at the current stage. And then I'm going to go into the deeper dive of our phasing over the next year and a half.
Yeah, good morning. It's nice to be here with all of you. I think most of you have met me before. I work on housing authority side policy. And I'll talk for a couple minutes just on the federal context for EHV and also some on our more specific context. So the emergency housing voucher, which we are calling EHV, was funded through the ARPA Act, the American Rescue Plan, and its intent was to provide rental assistance to households who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And the vouchers were originally slated to be available through September 30th, 2030. They were never intended to be permanent, but it was intended to be a pretty long-term resource for households. There are over 56,000 families nationwide currently assisted by this program. So the circumstance that we are in as a housing authority is not at all unique right now. This is something that's going to impact a lot of households and in a lot of places. EHV at Hawk, we were granted 89 non-renewable EHVs. Non-renewable in this case, we're indicating basically two things. One is that it was never intended to be a permanent rental subsidy that went into our permanent award as a housing authority. The other thing we're indicating here is that since 2023, there was no reissuance of turnover vouchers. So we had a limited sort of lease up period where if somebody left the program, we would still have that voucher for another household. But that period ended in 2023 and it was not intended to assist additional households since that period. So we have had some attrition since our full lease up in 2022 and 78 households are currently participating right now at Hawk. The housing voucher sunset, EHV had an initial $5 billion allocation. It was intended to last to 2030. It has not, but also covering that gap between the initial timeline of the program and the funding source sort of spending down faster than hoped or anticipated just is not at all a priority of our current administration. So it's sort of a combination of factors feeding into what's going on with EHV right now. So in March of 2025, HUD announced our final funding allocation for EHV. Basically said to every housing authority, we're going to tell you what we're going to give you and no more. That's it. We're cutting you off. No more EHV for any housing authority. At HAWC, we'll go to the next slide, thanks. At HAWC, the people who are going to be impacted are again 78 households, families, which does include, whenever we say family, we are also including single individuals living by themselves as one of the family types of families we serve. A total of 185 individuals, 84 of them are kids, 67 are elderly or disabled individuals. And when we say elderly or disabled here, we're talking about a very narrow HUD definition of disability, households who might be impacted by disabilities that are not sort of like HUD recognized. That could be a much larger number, and it is going to be a larger number. And 80% of the households are extremely low income, which is 30% area median income, and that is about $37,000 a year for a family of 4. All households are low income in this program. Next slide, please. Our sunset projection, this slide sort of groups together a few different, like our 2025 funding, our projected 2026 funding, and any other available funding sources into one category to illustrate the spend down. We basically entered the fiscal year with about $1.9 million projected for this program, and our anticipated spending rate based on exactly what we're doing right now follows that green or the blue line and would end in November 2026. We are working with HUD on some strategies that will allow us to stretch our funding into April 2027 on that program. Liz will get more into it, but the key feature there is HUD administrative waivers that will simplify our ability to transfer EHV households to other rental assistance programs. So we can extend our runway a little bit, but that's what we're looking at, sometime between November 2026 and April 2027, when we will bend down our program. I'll get back to Liz to discuss exactly what we're doing. Okay, thank you.
So next slide. We've been thinking about this in phases. We've been in phase 1 and we're currently in phase 1 right now, which is creating a waitlist preference, which we had to get part of those HUD waivers that Em was just talking about. So requesting that flexibility from HUD. And we did request it, and we actually, like, about 2 weeks ago, got our approval from HUD that that waiver was accepted. And this allows us to put them onto the Housing Choice Voucher wait list. Reserve mainstream voucher capability. Mainstream vouchers serve households that are non-elderly and disabled because of the eligibility for how people came onto the emergency housing voucher program with homelessness definition. That is where that read, and they have to come on to mainstream based off of our Housing Choice Voucher wait list. So it's a very like step-by-step to make that even work as a fund. We're also going to be getting our outreach to emergency housing voucher participants. Even though this has been public, HUD has made this public and other people have known about it, a lot of households that are served by our 3,000 plus vouchers don't know exactly what house voucher title they have. So they don't know if they're on a mainstream voucher, emergency housing voucher, or housing choice voucher, or project-based voucher, right? Like it's just they're like, I'm receiving subsidy. And we've been trying to strategically work with the comms and engagement team, as well as some of the questions we want to make sure with you all before we send out that notice, because it's going to cause a little bit of concern. We're going to have a lot of FAQs with that. And then we're going to be getting that transfer of all those households to the Housing Choice Voucher wait list. And I'd like to talk about like that is that we've been funding you've heard us talk about shortfall. You've heard us talk about not having enough funding in our voucher. So even we're transferring these households to the Housing Choice Voucher waitlist, we're not pulling off that waitlist right now too. So it is kind of this part where as we try to solve, how can we continue to support these households, these families that are currently receiving subsidy, you know, giving them other vouchers, there might not be funds to it. It's further stalling the voucher wait list and all of these considerations. Our phase 2 is coming up starting in December, so we're going to be utilizing those waitlist flexibilities. We want to work in making sure that there's any other placements that we can see what's out there, right? How can we encourage maybe some preferences and priorities for these household members. Work with development partners and secure HD preferences, maybe on affordable housing property sites in their own wait list. If they have vacancies, the households would qualify because of all of them, as mentioned, were low income, a majority under 60% of area median income. They would probably qualify and then still maybe not have as reduction of rent portion, but they would still have a reduction of their rent portion for their family income towards their rent. And we're going to continue to monitor those federal appropriations. We're coming up at you all are probably monitoring the federal guidelines of September 30th of what's happening there, and we don't have a budget yet. So that will also potentially impact how we might be able to then open up other opportunities with our current resources, or if it's going to stay stagnant as what we are kind of planning for at this time. Phase 3 is that if once we've kind of done the strategic moving that we're able to do with what we have, with the information that we have, we're going to see how can we support the remaining households. So the goal is to see, once we get down to it, instead of focusing on 78 households, if we're able to get 15 of them into another source, then we only have to focus on 60, you know, and then we're going to keep kind of figuring out what are the leftover households. And that's a weird way of saying it, leftover households, but what are those households? What are those needs that they have specifically? So that could be contracting with housing navigation services, supportive services, supporting assessments for alternative rent programs through coordinated entry potential, continuum care programs, part of that. Continuing prioritize federal funding for assistance. So it will give us, as we are continuing to like kind of reduce those numbers, we don't have, again, the ability to just like plot people from one program to another program. It's very complicated. There are placements that we don't have in a lot of our regional programs either. So we're kind of just continuing to explore those options. And then phase 4, final preparations that will be happening is that as the program does any of those remaining households, either that they were not eligible to go into another rental assistance program, their program subsidy will be ending. And we will be doing outreach to those households to give them the notice. Once they are no longer eligible to receive subsidy, because we don't have any more subsidy to give, we'll continue to work with them for 90 days to see if there's any additional assistance that we can help with that. But there will be a point where they're usually, when somebody's no longer a participant on our program, we'll help them with general resources. We're going to do a little bit more that we can help with these households a little bit further, even though they're not technical participants, because they had been participants. It's really hard when you talk about this in black and white, because it is like, these are people, we know that these are people and these are households, and there's a lot that goes more into each of these phases and each of these comments that I'm making. And so we're definitely not taking light of any situation that's going on. Those households that are going to also be moved to the Housing Choice Voucher wait list. So if they end their subsidy and we're able to pull off the voucher wait list in 2 or 3 years, they could be coming back onto our program. So there is that will not change if they exit. They will remain on that wait list until they're able to get subsidy. And they no longer need it at that time when we pull them. That is great. So our questions about, we have some next steps that are kind of immediately coming up. Is there going to be physically doing the transfer of those 78 households and putting them on our Housing Choice Voucher wait list? which has about 1,600 people on it right now. So we'll be adding those names onto that list, which is part of the waiver that we had to acquire, because that wait list has been closed since 2021. We're gonna continue to monitor any changes from federal appropriations, and spending updates. We're gonna be advocating with all the other housing authorities. As I mentioned, there's 56,000 households nationally that are going through this. We have 78, our friends regionally on board have somewhere in the like 400, 500 phases, and we know other housing authorities have some up to close to thousands that they're working on. And we're gonna be working with other participants. We want to refer and work with our participants to get them the access that they need to services that they need to find out what other homeless and affordable solutions that are out there. So that is kind of where we're at in our current phase of planning, or what our current guiding looks like. And we wanted to see what comes next that you all are kind of percolating in these conversations as you've been hearing about it over the last several months, as you're getting a little bit deeper dive today. What other questions that you might have, and kind of let's open it up for discussion. So before we fully open up to our discussion question points, is there any clarity on the information that I gave or that Em gave that you might need before we go into the questions, so they can help inform those discussion questions? Oh, who is first? Okay.
No, that's at the table.
Okay.
I was just wondering, and maybe the wait list is not 1 through 1,600. When they enter the wait list, where are they entering the wait list?
I can clarify that. The households for EHV, the preference that we have, it's the same as the preference we would have for households who were terminated for shortfall for other reasons, like, which means they're first effectively. And that preference can layer with other preferences we have already in our administrative plan for households with disabilities, households fleeing domestic violence, veterans, right? So there's a potential that not all of those households will have all of those preferences, but the one that they're guaranteed to have is that preference for households whose assistance was terminated due to insufficient funding. And the order that they'll be added is going to be based on their entry to the EHV program within that preference. That'll be their effective date. Thank you.
A follow-up related to Haley's question. If you did simple math, 1,600 people on all of the funnels of the voucher program, if I heard correctly.
Yeah.
What's that number if we magically snapped our fingers and said money showed up? Is it $300 a household? Is it $1,000 a household? Just for perspective.
Well, I think
Ish.
Directionally. You might actually have a little bit of information from Ryan's slide about rent assistance. He said specifically on it, it shows that our funding that we're getting is about $1,100 per subsidy, but our cost is about $1,200-1,300 per household. And even then too, with the 1,600, if we were able to serve them all, we only have an allocation from HUD of 3,481, and we currently have like 3,000-ish. So we only have like 300 more that we could technically.
Yeah, and I wasn't even talking about funding source, just if the money showed up.
If the money showed up.
Is it $300 a household or is it $1,000 a household, perspective wise?
It's $1,250.
So it's $1,250, that top line number, okay.
A month.
Got it. Yeah, and that's where I was going. I wasn't trying to solve the gap. I was just trying to understand what the scope of the issue was, so, okay.
Just a follow-up question on that. So the 1,250 for a household, let's say 37,000, how much are they actually paying of their own income to complement that 1,200? And is that enough? Or is there still a gap for them to get housing in the market?
Households on our federal voucher programs pay 30% of their minimum of 30%, but it could be more than that.
So I just did quick math, so it might be like 900 a month that they're actually paying of the 37,000.
No, like that's our full subsidy. So like they're actually, so the average rent for a household right now in Washington County is something, I would have to get the exact number, but it'd be more like the $1,700. So they're paying on average the $300 per month, and we're paying the $1,250. Now that's it's just an example of
Yeah,
what
yeah,
it could be
yeah,
like to break down. So that is our subsidy cost is the 1,200 that we're talking about.
Thank you. We're talking about the outreach is starting. You haven't done that yet, but.
Yes.
What's that look like right now?
So we are gonna be sending out probably the first week of October, around October 7th. We'll be mailing out a letter. We'll be also presenting to the Chabad. And so it's gonna be kind of timed to that as well, because this is public meeting, that's a public meeting. We're gonna be sending out those letters that will have just so everybody aware that you're on this voucher program. And it's gonna include like a long FAQ, which includes that everybody will know that they're being moved on to the Housing Choice Voucher wait list. That's gonna be done. And then it's going to be what is the next step. So that's kind of our starting point with participant engagement.
And of the 70 people impacted, if we can't move them to another voucher program, what does impacted mean? Does it mean from housed, unhoused?
It does mean that their rental assistance could potentially end. if we
Yeah, and
can't
so
find a living place for them.
the end game for them could be they have some risk of going from housed to unhoused.
They can no longer pay the full contract rent on their lease. They could potentially have to move or be evicted.
And Bruce, I think in the earlier presentation slides, Liz showed that a huge percentage, I think it's like, I wanna say, I think there's only 3 households that had income over 50,000.
Right.
So on that basis, we know that they will be, whatever happens, if they're not gonna be able to get a voucher, go into an affordable housing program or project, they will probably be either you can call it extremely rent burden or potentially on the verge of being unhoused.
Right.
Can I offer some reassurance?
Yes, because I'm thinking, what else can we do?
Because
This is the conversation.
And this is why our team, our homeless services team is working in partnership with Liz and the rent assistance and housing authority team to make sure we're offering as much as we can to all of the impacted households and prioritizing any flexible resources we might have to the most vulnerable or the highest needs according to income gaps. So that those who might be able to fend their way in the market, we give them some guidance, and those who won't be successful with fending their way in the market, we're finding some bridges to other programs as best as we can with the resources we have.
And that's why, like Jess said, one of the things we are trying to do is figure out who else is out there asking for your help. Because we don't have all the information.
So Ryan, and then we'll get to some of our questions. Feedback.
I was gonna be on.
So what other partners should we collaborate with? Is anything coming up for anyone?
I did a eating AI resource just to see what it came up with, and then said, hey, did you talk to Vienna Star if anyone's.
All the SHS partners, right?
Yeah.
Potential resource, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
One interesting one was, there's a lot of children being affected, and where the schools and school districts, the counselors they might have in that support group.
I'm actually working on a meeting with the Beaverton School District for McKinney-Vento connections for our households generally, but specifically this option, and they're gonna help me get connected with the other school districts too. So, yeah, it's great.
And it's not particularly the voucher program only, but do we know all of the senior people at credit unions in the state? And I talk about that because I know the folks at First Cred right around the corner, the $30 billion credit union. Their vision, we used to raise a couple $1 million a year for Dornbecker and children. And so they're very focused on community. And at minimum, it would be nice to know their senior people, to let them know what we're doing in the community, because it's kind of connected. Their whole vision is, I get a tax break federally because I'm giving back to my community. It's a long-term discussion, but for financing, interim financing, etc., it seems that we should know those folks. Just conversational, to say, hey, as a heads up, this is what we're doing. Cause they're very aligned to community, so, kind of in your world. Anyway, as a thought, longer term solution.
As a partnership.
This is completely out of left field, my comment, but
Mine's pretty close.
my comments, yours is great, and not where my brain is because, I'm an architect. If a lot of the families are a lot of families, which if you said 78 households and how many actual individuals, 185. In an effort to offset some of the costs so that they can afford to put more money to rent. Have we explored opportunities for connections in perhaps offsetting the cost of childcare? And I know in Multnomah County, there's a preschool for all, or I'm gonna get the universal, and I don't know that it's here.
It's not.
It's not.
Some people want it to be,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Well, I know it's real contentious in Multnomah County anyhow, so, about people paying for that, but, I know as a mom of an 8-year-old who's spent an enormous amount of money on childcare, for one child, that's often where a lot of the costs are coming for families, and so has there been any engagement in programs to help offset childcare costs? In an effort to allow families an opportunity to put more resources towards rent. That would be one of my thoughts. Okay, so,
It also, if I can just add, I think it's a good idea. It also allows some low income households to earn income. They can't because they can't afford the
Yeah,
childcare,
exactly.
right?
exactly.
Yeah, it's a concentric circle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know who those are,
Yeah.
but that's just my thought process is trying to think of, what those are.
Lisa, and we'll go to the next question, we'll spend about 3 minutes on that question and then 2 minutes before we get to you all get me in the next presentation about these vouchers.
I see Molly's hand is up too.
So Lisa, then Molly.
I was just curious about the connection between the EHVs and the other wait lists. Is there any policy that we have in our admin plan that prioritizes people losing their EHV voucher, puts them at the top of the list?
Yes.
You were just talking about that earlier, okay.
Yes.
So will they go to the top of all lists?
They'll go to the top of our housing choice voucher waiting list, which we also use for our mainstream voucher program.
Molly?
in a slightly, which is, we have people, you guys pretty,
Molly,
can
you're cutting out, sorry, we can't hear you.
you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yep.
a little bit better.
It was, okay, I kind of hiding my butt. I'm just thinking about the people in this room. Some of you guys own and operate affordable housing, wondering if we could explore with you, or perhaps others we could be talking to about potentially creating our own prioritization at some point, if getting into affordable housing for those that could income qualify or meet your income to rent ratios. If we had to, we want to place people in affordable housing if we can.
I did wanna, we've worked with a lot of senior housing that have internal vouchers of their own that aren't necessarily broadcast or, so reaching out to those communities and seeing if they have internal programs that can help some of those seniors.
I think that was one of the funnels that came to my mind with affordable housing programs.
And that is one of the things we at the Department of Housing Services trying to do. We've already, I think we showed it last time to HAC, I think it was June, where we showed the listing of all the affordable housing properties in the county. And we now have a lot of that information on our website, but it is still, how would I describe it? When available units are available, the affordable housing owner operators don't know who is out there to apply. And getting that linkage between who is a low income resident and need a house and who has a unit. We as a system do not have that integrated system. We're hopeful that something may happen, but it's not there yet. And I see that.
Thank
Dave
you.
Locke.
Dave's gonna have the solution, I think.
Yes.
It's a big promise. But no, I think we could help compile a kind of a prioritized look of area properties, inclusive of properties that are nearing completion of construction. And we can work on that broader list just beyond our portfolio as well, but also encapsulate, qualification standards and that type of things and unit sizes, so we can start to, hopefully line up where people might be able to qualify or have solutions. It might be at the present moment in time, it might be a fairly wide net, or it might be beyond Washington County, but at least, we could definitely assemble that.
That would be great, Dave.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much, Dave. Are there anything that's coming to folks' minds of how we can best address participants' concerns?
I did have one, the mailer is great at the first start, and then that outreach, I know individual outreaches to each person takes a lot of time and effort, but also a small group meeting of people that are close together where they can have each other as resources as well to help understand, because they're the ones living through it and will understand it better.
And if things come to you magically on your drive home or just, cooking dinner and you want to email us, please feel free to always do this. And then the last question, is there any other actions that we should be taking that you're not hearing, that we even haven't shared in our proposals or phases, or that we've just missed? Well, again, I'll invite you all, if you do think of something, please feel free to reach out. You have our information, you have my information. But specifically, that we'll be giving more updates along the way of just maybe some of those key phase points. It might just be an update that's in the packet versus a full presentation, unless there's just general update questions that folks might have along as we have. If we have any big wins, we'll also come and share those. Because we know this has been on everybody's hearts and minds over the last several months. And thank you for your time on the emergency housing vouchers. You get to continue with me a little bit longer. We're going to shift into our project-based vouchers and some of our upgrades that we're doing to that program. I think so. I want to just give a shout out to Em, who really helped contribute a lot of this content that you're going to be seeing as well. All right. So we are changing the way that we do our housing choice voucher project-based or federally funded project-based vouchers wait lists to a zone wait list and some future project-based voucher waiting list openings that we're going to be having. So our goal is to continue improvement. We want to talk about what that looks like. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of our current contexts for our project-based vouchers, PVVs. So some of the MTW flexibilities that we've used, why are we doing these changes, what's happening this fall, and then the opportunity for any questions. Well, you got to hear about one of our project-based voucher projects with Footsprings. We have 36 units there under project-based. So it was actually a lot of our project-based vouchers really help affordable housing have that feasibility so they can finish that. So us doing those projects a couple of years ago and committing those project-based vouchers kind of helped us acquire that site in addition to the others. We have 37 properties under contract. some with our dear friends. And that is 569 units. So out of the 2,172 affordable units that are in Washington County, 567 of them have a project-based voucher unit. Some of these affordable housing sites have other vouchers that might be used there, but the voucher, project-based voucher, is attached to the unit, not to the person. So somebody then comes in. So that's where it's a little bit different. The emergency housing voucher that we were just talking about was attached to the person. So those households, we'll talk a little bit about how that might connect with this project, a few more slides. All right, currently we have a little bit, we're serving all over the county. All right, we have properties in Forest Grove, Cornelius, all the way down in Tigard, and Keene City, Beaverton, Hillsborough. So it shows just the vastness of what's currently going on and what we have currently contracted. What it does not show is the about 3 to 5 different projects that we have under construction or that we have promised that are coming online in the next several years. Next slide. So affordable housing with our wait list that we have had, when we became an MTW agency, we kind of changed the way that we did our wait list, but we couldn't change the wait list that we had pre-MTW. So what we have is if you're post MTW, so post July 1, 2023, when we were implementing it, if you have a wait list or a contract that had come on board and you have a vacancy or renting or leasing up a brand new property, you're going to be pulled off of our general wait list, which serves the entire county. And if you're before that, each site had its own wait list. So we have 20 wait lists that are site-based and then one that's a general. It's a lot of wait list management that happens, and it can be very confusing. We have old wait lists, our general wait list. The cons that we have is that somebody might currently live and work in Tigard and they get pulled for Forest Grove, which is a bit of a commute. It's a little bit hard. And so people do have the right to refuse a couple of times, but if that property is not coming up in their locale, then we might be changing. That's where their childcare is. That's where their jobs are. That's where the school district is that their kids are in. Household size is really hard as well because there's requirements that you can't have like a 1 person in a 3-bedroom unit. So we have to make sure that we have enough eligible household sizes per bedroom size. There's a lot of coordination with coordinated entry. There's eligibilities. We might have the person eligible for our voucher program, but maybe they don't meet the eligibility for the site when they go to apply at the site. There's property coordination and pulling from many. Sometimes we have to submit like 50 to 100 referrals to get 1 unit leased off of our wait list. And sometimes that's because that wait list is a site-based, you know, even though we've kind of we confirm it, which is a purge is another way of doing that to make sure that it's still a relevant list. People are coming, they just might not be in the place where their information's up to date, even though we do our best to try to like encourage that. We ask for that. We try to keep sure our wait lists aren't stale. We have about 7,500 people on our wait lists, and that's after a confirmation that was done last year. So across all of our project-based wait lists. So when households can be selected from that general wait list as well and have identified specific areas, we really want to give people the opportunity with a proposal of a zone wait list, as they can say, I want to be in zone, which is like just the Forest Grove Cornelius area. I want to be in that. So we're going to go a little bit more of like what a proposal is to make it where people are saying, I don't just, or I want all of it, right? They can say I want all, my goal is to get housed in Washington County. It doesn't matter where, or my goal is to get housed in Washington County in Hillsborough. So a little bit more history about our move to work. It's been a long goal of ours to continue to improve this. So this is kind of probably like phase 3 to 6 or 7, depending on like count the pieces of our continual try to improving our projects and our administration. It's been a long-term time goal since we became an MTW agency in 2021. We've actually, of our flexibilities, we've been able to award 18 of our project-based contracts because of some of those MTW flexibilities, which is over 300 assisted units. And that also really is a big connection to the Metro Bond expansion that happened in 2019. That was collaborated with the increased affordable housing in Washington County as well. So some of the waivers that we had to do, next slide, is increase our program cap. So a standard housing authority is only allowed to have up to 25% of their voucher allocation as project-based. So we increased that so we could have more if we needed to, because that's just what the needs of that affordable housing pipeline. We know we want to bring more properties into the community. We increased the PBD cap of veterans and some, I'm sorry, it's not veterans.
The cap, the project cap.
The project cap of how many units you can have at a specific project. I'm sorry, there's a program cap and the project cap. And it's project-based vouchers. We love our words that are all the same. We also streamline our selection process for when properties are coming up or projects are coming up. We did put in for pre-qualifying inspections. We haven't implemented that MTW waiver. That is one of the ones that we will be doing, but we have to continue to like improve our system. Limiting portability, so households have to be in the project-based unit for at least 2 years before they're eligible to request a housing choice voucher admin transfer. And we also have our alternate payment standards to help continue to make that more affordable for us because we have to pay that subsidy. And then strategic wait list requirements. We are making some of these changes because we want to benefit a lot of people. We want to benefit the applicant, we want to benefit the property, we want to benefit us. Like we're hoping for the win-win-win. Applicants, it's going to be a little bit easier for them to kind of the support and figure out where they want to live. They also with this improvement, they might get pulled up faster and have that pre-approval process that we kind of want to work on. So they'll be able to indicate like what specific zone that they want. They want all 4 zones, they only want one, it will be up to them. The properties, it will help reduce the vacancy. So when we're polling, they're not getting a list of 50 people, but like 45 of those folks didn't want to live in that area. So then it's truly only a list of 5 people. They're going to get a list of here's referrals for X amount of people who are either pre-approved by the housing authority fully and who want to live in that area. So then hopefully it will reduce that paperwork turnover. As well as staff time for having to keep up with that. Every single time we send out a referral to the property, we have to then close it out and then put them back on, and it just becomes logistically fun. So this is what we will look like. So you saw that map of where our properties are. This is our proposed zones. Is that we'll do a Forest Grove Cornelius because they are kind of close together. Hillsborough itself, there's quite a few properties there. Beaverton, Cedar Mill. I think this is how it's gonna be marketed on our website. So then when somebody's getting there and they're like, I want to apply for the voucher, for your project-based vouchers, so they'll be able to see this map and then they won't have to know what the area, they'll have a couple of different visuals so it can be a little bit easier. As well as then Tiger. And then if we have new developments come on board and they're kind of outside one of the zones, we're just gonna see which makes the most sense to add them to, and then we'll update our website at that time. But this is kind of our current and our projections of what's coming online wasn't really outside of those zones. So we're not really worried about that for the next, that's 5-year problem, not today's problem. So in order to do this, we've kind of exhausted pieces of our general wait list right now. We've exhausted pieces of our individual wait list right now. That by exhausting pieces of it means we might not have any 2 bedrooms or 3 bedroom, even though we have a bunch of people who are eligible for 1 bedroom. So we are going to be opening our wait list under the new project proposal zones in fall of 2025. Our dates are not 100% solidified, but it's most likely going to be the first ish week of November. And with this project-based voucher waitlist will then kind of remain open. I'll talk a little bit of the caveat on that in a second. And what will happen is that households, because it's gonna remain open, we're not gonna do a confirmation every year that we are manually kind of making happen. It's gonna be automatically happening. And it's called Save My Spot. It's through our software system. And so minimum once a year, households will have to confirm. If not, then they're gonna be removed. And if they come back and say, hey, like I was removed accidentally, we'll have hardships of being able to add them into the same spot they were, or they can just be added because at the end, because it's always gonna be open. So the goal is that we'll continually to have a vibrant wait list where people who are actively needing housing in the county will be able to show up and see that they need it. It'll also give us some good data of like the actual needs that are out there by having it continually opened. When we say that it's, the caveat that I was gonna give is when we do open our wait list, we are gonna open it for 1 week. And then we're gonna close it because we're gonna take everybody who applied in that week. We're gonna do a randomization of lottery for accessibility. So you don't have to be the best on the internet to apply with your skills. And then people will get kind of placed wherever they are into their 1, 2, 3. So then when we have to poll, then it's gonna be open back. And then it's just gonna be standard. But we wanna make sure that we are giving more accessibility so we don't day one have a huge line out the door. That's kind of housing authority standard practices for waitlist openings, be utilizing that. So if you do see that it's only open for 1 week, closed, and you're like, I thought you said it's gonna be open forever. It will be open. It's just that we wanna make sure we have accessibility opportunity. So the good news is that they're not going to be limited to how many zones they want to apply to. And we're also going to be informing our emergency housing voucher households that we're not going to automatically put them on this, that they're going to be encouraged to apply to the wait list for that. They will be automatically put onto the housing choice voucher wait list, but we're going to let them know that the wait list is opening for the project-based vouchers, and we encourage them to apply and then make sure we do that specific outreach for them on that as well. So anybody who's currently on the voucher wait list as well will be also notified. We know this list has been stagnant and not moving. If you'd like to apply, please make sure you do that. We did this when we opened it in 2023. To make sure that those households know. So some of them might already be on that list. People can be on multiple lists. And once they're selected, if they are just like, nope, I don't want to live there. Okay, that's great. We can see if the next property works. Nope, I don't want to live there. Okay, after 3 refusals, they do get removed. Like, it doesn't look like this is an opportunity that you're interested in right now. So we're gonna remove you. You're more than welcome to apply for the wait list in the future. The future could be tomorrow if they want to, but we're just that way we can close it up for our purposes administratively. And then our goal of the outcome is just to really be help responsive needs of the community. We really want to make this helpful so it's quicker for our affordable housing partners, properties that they can have vacancies filled quicker. We want to make it easier for our participants to navigate. We want to make it easier for staff members. Like that's the win-win-win wish we're hoping. We're going to continue to analyze as we go through and the changes. So that is a lot. And then we know that there's going to be continued, and once we kind of go through this, there'll be continual next steps of bigger outreach to all of the landlord providers with more training, so we can kind of continue to like improve how our process and they work with us. We're going to provide a lot more steps along the way for general operations, but this is more about the wait list. So questions.
Before you start off, I just wanted to make sure all of you heard, means that the wait list is opening. And it is a major thing. We don't open our wait list. I mean, I don't know if you guys recall when Home Forward opened their wait list, they only opened it for I think it was only 3 days. And they had thousands of applicants. So this is a major thing we're moving forward with, even just opening it for a short time to get some work done. I'm actually a little apprehensive because I think we will get flooded.
Yeah.
But I did want to say this is a major event that we're happening, and Love to hear your thoughts. Sorry. about
Yeah.
that.
Well, I had a quick question, but then if I'm allowed to just make a comment. The question was the payment standard, is that 60%, what is called 60% rents?
Our payment standard
Yeah.
is based off of it's 90%. It's around 90%. So we have an affordable payment standard and a market rate payment standard. And so project-based vouchers are only eligible for the affordable because
Right.
they're affordable properties.
Right.
So, and it's
Okay.
typically, but it's actually a little bit higher because
Okay.
the FMRs keep decreasing, but that's where we see that the payment standard's not changing.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I think this is really great. I think you did a good job. It was a good, to me, as somebody who's used these project-based vouchers, I think you explained it really well. And a quick example and then a quick just additional point for the committee. When we opened our Cornelius project, you may recall, Liz, I think my staff were calling you probably every day for a while. We were leasing up this project. We were on a very tight timeline, just so y'all know. The timeline to lease up, because you have banks breathing down your neck when you're opening this thing up to close by a certain date and lease up by a certain point and convert to permanent financing. So breathing down our neck is literally what was happening. So we were working with your team. I think it was overall a positive experience, but we did have exactly some of the scenarios you described, where I think the example I heard was someone from Sherwood is being told, hey, we have an apartment in Cornelius, totally opposite ends of the county pretty much, right? And I think in that case, the person decided no, but what happened was a huge amount of time was going into situations like that where you had to tell the person in Sherwood, and then they had 2 weeks, you know the timelines better than I do, Liz, but I heard from my team like, okay, every time that happens, there's like a month lost where we're trying to fill this unit. So just, I think it's a very commendable idea, I like it. And the other just quick observation for everyone who doesn't, necessarily deal with banks all the time, is that these vouchers, these project-based vouchers, actually not only help the families get the voucher, obviously, but they also help developers because they are long-term financing that lenders will lend against. So they'll give you more money to build your project if they have project-based vouchers, if that makes sense, because it is what they consider to be pretty close to guaranteed source of income. So it actually helps with the feasibility to create new units of affordable housing by making them project-based. So I just thought I'd say that because it's very helpful.
So how many units per property are project based?
It depends on the property. And they have pretty much at least 8. And a lot of times properties don't go over 8 because if they have more than 8, they trigger Davis-Bacon. Which I'm sure the folks at this table, if they would like to give a TED talk on Davis-Bacon, they can give you the pros and cons.
If you want to get really TED Talk, you're talking about bowling.
And that just means more regulatory requirements during the build and it costs more. But there's also where there's pros and cons to it, right? And so it's always the weighing of it. I think the largest ones we have close to 40, 50. I think most of we have a lot of 8s. And then a few 16s, but like a lot of the 32s, 36. I'm trying to think, I could go through the properties list on some of the report outs that we've given in previous active reports from the programs has had the list of the properties and the list of the amounts at each property. So we could look for that for the next program update that comes up. Yeah.
Trying to corroborate wait lists. 1,600 on the emergency. And you mentioned 7,500. I'm confused on wait lists.
Yes. Yeah.
So
the 1,600 is the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 wait list. Only, which is like you get that, you can rent market rate, right?
So the 7,500 is in addition, but a different funnel, different funnel.
It's the same pocket of fund from HUD to us.
Okay.
But the funnel is that we have these commitments, and so then it is X amount of 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, and then that's where and the 7,200, it could be multiple people. It's just 7,200. So one person could be on 4 wait lists right now, and we're counting that as 4, not 1. Because it's the wait list management of that is 4. Yeah, so and that's for that just statistic. If you want the other, that's one I know off the top of my head because I've been in that round. We need the specific people's statistic.
Yeah, I was just trying to corroborate lists and understand.
Yeah. We're at time. So any last comments before I hand it back to Ryan? you all had like an hour of me, so thank you so much for getting time.
Yes, thank you. We are really close on time, so probably, we did have a suggested future discussions. Conversation, what we want to talk about in the future. We do kind of have a running list from previous, but keep that on the top of your mind and we'll review those later. So if there's no, is there any additional business anyone wants to talk about before we make a motion to close the meeting?
I don't have any additional business, but I was just gonna ask the exact date that waitlist was gonna open, because all it said was fall, and I thought we were in fall.
Yes,
As of,
the date is slightly to be determined. It is definitely gonna be in the first week or two of November. But we don't know the exact like X to X yet right now.
Hey,
will know.
Linda, we're working right now on the timeline because before the waitlist open, we need to make sure that operationally, we have sufficient staff. As well as making sure that any of the notifications, the communications is done appropriately. Because we don't want to open it up and then actually not be able to execute. We're also going to be going to the Housing Board of Directors in October. So whatever feedback you all have on these presentations, both the EHV as well as the waitlist. It would be great if you just send it to Liz or myself, because we're going to be presenting that to Chabad, and your feedback will be greatly appreciated.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. Second. All of those.
Third.
All of those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I think we're good. Thank you. everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Bye, everyone.
Everybody.
Thanks, everyone.